Thank you very much for attending. We have a surprise guest actually today. So first, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Rakesh Loonkar. I'm one of the founders of Transmit Security. Before, I was one of the founders of Trusteer. So if anyone's ever heard that company, it was acquired by IBM. And I'm joined with Dean Anderson, the person who runs customer identity at TD Bank. And our surprise guest is Rob Davis, who has the same job at TIAA. So just to give context to the group, Dean, TD Bank is one of the top 10 North American financial institutions, big presence in North America, United States, Canada, about 15 million users. And then Rob, TIAA is Fortune 80, right?
Right.
And approximately how many users?
We have probably about online users, about 6 million total online accounts, including our bank.
Okay, great. And Dean, I'm going to start with you. Before you started to look at identity products about 3 years ago,
Yep.
and we were lucky enough to have you as one of our first customers. The bank really looked at identity differently. You started to look at it from not just a IDP perspective, but from an anti-fraud perspective. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because it's really different from the way kind of all the banks were looking at identity at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're right. We started looking at how do we take identity as just a service, and how do you take it into the customer journey? So when you think about it, identity and the fact that you have to prove your identity is core and fundamental to every single interaction that you have with your customers. So our philosophy was we need a partner, and I think that's what you guys are as a partner. We need a partner that will allow us to create that kind of ecosystem where we can promote identity as a differentiating factor to promote trust with our customers, to enhance the customer experience, and create a frictionless environment, as frictionless as possible. There's always going to be some friction with identity, of course. But what we realized is that what we needed was an orchestration layer and a partner that understood that vision to join us on this journey that we were on.
Oh, great. And Rob, you actually started with a completely different use case. Lots of people talk about web and mobile, and you met Transmit a few years ago now,
Right.
When we were just getting started, and you started in the call center. Can you talk a little bit about the essence of the problem you were trying to solve?
This started actually 3 years ago. We had our first conversation. I was in a meeting with our enterprise financial crimes group and our fraud governance group. Our biggest use case at the time was, how do we get our call center reps to receive customers on the phone and understand whether they're authenticated or not authenticated? And we had a number of technologies that we were looking at. One of them, a line noise analytics product that we were currently looking to integrate. And the head of the call center group turns to me and he says, I can't have my call center reps analyze the data, the risk scores, coming in from this. And I said, well, what you need is some sort of decision engine, right? And
Yep.
we had this conversation with you already, and we said, well, why don't we take a look at collecting all of the IVR data, collecting the line noise risk associated with the call, and then drop that answer into the call center so the customer can be authenticated or not authenticated and require more work to authenticate them. And the way we did that was we integrated Transmit Security and their policies to work through that, bringing all of that data into Transmit and making the decision for the call center rep. It takes the decision out of their hands, the guesswork out of their hands. And when we released that in August of 2017, and was very well received. We piloted it to 50 users in the call center while we waited for a custom homegrown solution to be done at the same time. We actually beat them to market and then onboarded the rest of our 850 call center reps in 2017. And that just sort of then went on to the next web and mobile use cases.
That's great. And so you're both actually two very happy customers of Ping. And does Transmit do what Ping does, and does Ping do what Transmit does?
You want to go first?
Yeah, maybe I'll.
So Transmit lives independently. Like, it does what Ping does, and it also supplements Ping, right? So, you know, we don't see a need to kind of get rid of Ping, but we see Transmit as being additive to what Ping brings to the table.
And,
right.
And Rob, can you talk about how the two companies work really closely together and complement each other, and kind of, how
Sure.
you think about what Ping does and how you think about real-time decisioning?
It was probably a little less than 2 years ago actually at the was it the Boston conference? Yes, it was the Boston conference. We had the Ping engineers and the Transmit security engineers sitting in the expo off to the side of the area, the dining area, on the napkin, writing out how the two would integrate together. So we had the Transmit product and the Ping product, and we're trying to figure out how the two of them get together. It's like, we're going to write this adapter, and we're going to set that in the middle, and that'll handle the communications, which is pretty much a standard way that you would integrate the two products together.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a good partnership there.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah. If I can also add that, as we kind of roll out, and go deeper with Transmit, we know that, not only is it a customer-facing value add, we will reach a point where we can then kind of flip those tools in the orchestration layer and what Transmit brings internally, so that we can use those assets for employee authentication as well. We're not there yet, but that's our vision.
Yeah. I think we're along the same lines.
Yeah.
Great. And Rob, when people use the word orchestration, I feel like a lot of vendors use the word. How do you look at Transmit as it relates to orchestration? And there's kind of this like very, very siloed view and how it works with identity and kind of across products, and then there's this horizontal view of orchestration, which is kind of the way Transmit looks at it. Can you help the audience understand that?
This for us, the orchestration piece has been the problem with the orchestration piece for us historically has been around the complexity of the different types of use cases that we have to deal with. Right, we have a number of different customer types with a number of different scenarios and conditions that they would go through, anywhere between a bank customer, a retirement participant, a guest user, and our advisors. And the more those types of scenarios, the login scenarios, the account administration scenarios that we deal with, the more complex our code base got. So for us, the orchestration piece, being able to bring that into a product in terms of a configuration was huge for us. So the orchestration piece is once I identify who the user is, then I can go through a workflow. I can orchestrate the answer or the next step for them as they went through their journey.
Great. And Rob, you had some really discrete or like quantifiable lines of code that you eliminated from your various applications. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, part of the sell to our business and our technology group was we currently support, or we had supported before we went live, roughly 100,000 lines of code between UI and the service orchestration layer, and that was functions that were redundant across different customer groups. When we went live, we were able to eliminate 60,000 lines of code out of that code base, and it's all now configuration within Transmit.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
Yep. And Dean, kind of switching gears, and I'm going to come back. But originally, you looked at Transmit to replace a market-leading risk engine, and that project is almost complete, I think. or at least the decommissioning.
Weeks away. Weeks
yeah,
away.
Yeah. So do you want to talk about kind of, I guess some people look at Transmit only as an orchestration layer, and then some people look at it as a risk engine, and you looked at it uniquely as both.
Yeah, absolutely. We looked at it as both, but you touched on something very interesting. We looked at Transmit, and I think we worked with you guys to realize that it's really workflow, right? It's workflow around identity, and we realized that with the market-leading company that we were with in Canada that were slated to decommission in weeks, that they were basically a one-trick pony, let's call it. But that Transmit actually provides not only the orchestration layer and the risk engine, it allows you to kind of manage that entire workflow as the customer goes through whatever journey they're on, right? Whether it's in the call center, whether it's in the online or mobile, whether it's in the branch, and that's kind of our vision. So, what we found is that the company that we're slated to kind of roll off the books, as it were, just wasn't keeping. They weren't keeping up with our vision, and Transmit. Actually, the way we partnered together is that we built on each other's vision, right? Is that, we gave you guys ideas, you guys gave us ideas, and I think that we've evolved our thinking based on the fact that it's not an orchestration layer, it's not a risk engine, it's a workflow tool for identity, right? And it does both.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And you both came at it from different angles. Dean, you really first came at it from a web and mobile perspective, mm-hmm. and then the budget was actually funded by the Omnichannel group that wanted to connect it to the call center.
Absolutely.
And Rob, you started in the call center, and then in the second phase, integrated it in the web and mobile channels. And can you briefly describe what your vision is in terms of this kind of omni-channel user identity and why you're using Transmit for that? And so, Rob, I'll start with you, and then. Yeah.
Well, across our omni-channel, and again, we started in the call center. The idea was to start with the call center, provide them with the way to authenticate the user. We then moved into mobile, and as we onboarded the mobile devices through the mobile SDK that we built and wrapped that for our mobile team, we were able to add the biometrics for biometric push. So as we add the mobile capabilities, then the call center by default gets those capabilities. So now the call center rep, instead of asking questions or even doing an SMS OTP out to them, which we do with Transmit as well, we are able to push a signal to the mobile device to do a biometric in our app. Which was huge for them. So again, it decreases the amount of time it takes to authenticate them. And then, of course, we'll bring those to the web. And the web allows us to do mobile push now as well. It allows us to do one-time passcodes. It also allows our customers to call our call center and get an OTP if they don't have their device with them. And call the call center rep will give them an OTP, and they can plug that into the web to log in, which is great for them. To make a long story short, the reason why we're doing this and the reason why we'll be moving into the IVR, not the call center rep, but the IVR piece next year, is to bring all of those authenticators to across all of the channels to parity. Right, every channel has the same type of authentication in whatever channel, however you're dealing with TIAA.
Great, and Dean, can you elaborate on the kind of the TD vision and?
Yeah, absolutely. So very similar to TIAA, we had a vision on how do we bring all of the authenticators that we would ever think of to bear for any kind of customer interaction. We started with, we just happened to start with digital, right, online to mobile. That's where we started. And I guess a bit of a testament to the power of the Transmit platform and our vision collectively is that my role was expanded to be enterprise-wide so that we could plug in every single customer-facing interaction into this way of using identity, not necessarily as a friction, but as a way to differentiate ourselves and improve the customer experience, right? Because as a bank, really the only kind of currency you have, no pun intended, is the customer's trust, right? So that's really what we're trying to establish and push. So without the customer's trust, you don't really have any value that you can add. And what Transmit allowed us to do is to be able to shorten that development cycle, get authenticators plugged in fast, be the omnichannel presence that we wanted it to be, started again, as I said, with digital and online and mobile. But we are now doing, like you said, we're doing SMS OTP. Days away from doing push to the mobile device, which as you guys know is probably the gold standard of authentication. And now we're at a precipice in fiscal 2020 where we can now push that capability out to any customer interaction, whether it's branch, whether it's store, whether it's call center. But we, our approach, which is not dissimilar from TIA's approach, is that we just started in digital, built that foundation, and now we're kind of rolling that out, whereas you guys started in call center and are doing the same thing. So I think that we're very well aligned. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks. Now, both of you have initiatives and are thinking about passwordless, and I'm going to kind of talk about that in a second. So the first, for passwordless user flows, first, do you think you need FIDO? And the second question is FIDO the only thing you need as you think about passwordless flows? And then, just the third question to think about is, do you see passwordless different than frictionless? So who wants to take it first? So
I'll start. So we have FIDO with you guys, right? You guys are our FIDO server. So we already have that. So we would never kind of move away from that. That's where we are. I think your other question was, is passwordless equivalent to frictionless? I would say yes from a customer standpoint, yes. I know that we in the industry, know that passwordless is kind of where we are. I think that if you talk to regulators and if you talk to bank governance folks and risk folks and just senior leadership, they get a little nervous about passwordless, but it's really what you get with Transmit is that you get passwordless without having to say, we don't have any passwords anymore, right?
But by the way, it shows that regulators don't know anything, right? It's like,
well, I mean,
the shared secret.
It's like you and I were talking about, right? Yeah. You look at NIST standards and,
I didn't say that anyway, so.
I did.
Hopefully it's not being.
Actually, I did.
Delete that.
If there's any regulars out there, sorry. Sorry.
Yeah. No, and Rob, I want to make sure we have like a couple, maybe a minute more, and I want to take questions. But Rob, can you talk about how you think of orchestration and real-time risk as a component of being a passwordless strategy?
Right. So passwordless does not replace credential verification. The only reason you do passwordless is because you're replacing it with some sort of additional piece of information that you know and trust about that customer. You need the systems to orchestrate the collection of that data in order to allow for a passwordless environment, right? And I think we've got the great opportunities with the technologies that are coming out.
Great. I'm going to leave it. We have 5 minutes and 31 seconds, and I'll take questions
we have a clock here.
From the audience. So we have a question here. If you could just say your name and your company, that would be great.
Yeah, Kevin Warner with Prudential. I just had a question for both of you. You were both Ping and Transmit customers, and I was curious in your solutions, what is Ping doing and what is Transmit doing?
Great. So today, the way that we create, have the two products working together, Transmit does the authentication, and then it hands over the result to ping for session management, right? So we're managing and protecting the resources with ping, ping access and ping federate. Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Right. And the where's the orchestration?
Well, of course, the orchestration's all done. So you authenticate the customer. We orchestrate whatever requires after in the flow, risk scores, analysis, profile, intelligence in that context, and then when we're satisfied, we'll hand that over to Ping. They'll create the Ping access token and send them on their way down to the resources. Yeah.
And Dean, you're the
Identical.
same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Microphone.
Right here.
Garrett.
Thank you. Garrett Becker from 451 Research. I was just curious, in addition to Transmit, did you look at any other solutions out there in the marketplace?
Yeah, we did, thanks to our sourcing group requiring that. And again, we've had a discussion with Transmit for a number of years. So when we started this, of course, our process is we have to do due diligence with other vendors. So we did look at a number of other technologies. Based on our use cases, we didn't find one that was suitable.
Yeah. Very similar. So we started our conversation with Transmit in, 2016?
Yeah.
And there was one other vendor that had a kind of similar vision, which was called NCAP. They don't exist anymore. But really, Transmit was the only. What's that?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they were from the Netherlands, but they don't exist. Transmit was the only.
It's rude to talk about the dead. Sorry. It's okay.
But as has been said, is that at the time, and even now, well, at the time, there was no other vendor that had the vision that matched what we wanted to do, right? Which was orchestration, risk engine, and workflow, allowing the use of the authenticators that we have and ones that we want to build in. But I feel like everyone is now kind of jumping on that bandwagon, right? So.
Wait, right here.
Great.
Hi.
Oh.
Yes,
Hey, how are you?
Good, thank you. Khurram Hanif, I'm with JP Morgan and Chase. Along the same line of ping and transmit marriage, I think we are seeing more and more. Can you just clarify a little bit more about the flow? So when user first authenticate, does it first interact with transmit and then hand over to ping as a session management you mentioned, or because there's another flow that actually we are looking into where you first interact with ping and then use transmit as the IDP, just any other IDP, and that takes care of the orchestration.
For us, there's a number of ways that we could have implemented it. We chose to do transmit for authentication, credential validation, and then hand over for resource protection with ping. Yeah.
And the same. So we used. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, we used transmit decides, from a risk engine standpoint, as the first point, what authenticator is, appropriate, and then, kicks off that authenticator's action, and then manages that workflow as we go along.
Great.
Hey, Spencer Yezo, Bank of America. Question specifically for Dean. When you went through the process of migrating from your current risk engine, the proprietary one, to Transmit, could you go through the process of, did you start with a green field in terms of your policies that determined your risk, or did you just port over those rules as is and then kind of work from there?
Well, we took advantage of the fact that we knew we were going to a new technology, right, that made it far more adaptive. And we updated our policies and standards as we moved to Transmit to be more flexible relative to understanding that there's a lot of passive data that comes in, right, with tools like threat metrics or Nuance version 12 or Pindrop that you can get from even before the customer even kind of talks to someone or interacts with anything. So I guess we evolved our standards and policies as we kind of like went down the journey of integrating Transmit. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Right. And we have.
And last, our standards and policies were like really outdated. So we saw Transmit as a way to kind of refresh and modernize how we view authentication.
Right.
Hi, Andrew Sloper from Chase. Question for both of you. I mean, when you were approaching the initial investment, on what basis did you put the financial case together or the business justification, and how are you doing in terms of delivering against that?
So we took the angle of tech debt with our current code bases and where we wanted to move forward in the next 5 years. What we found is that we would be spending far more if we were building than buying, and that seemed to work for us.
Similar, tech debt, fraud savings, efficiency savings, and there's a piece that we're still trying to figure out how to quantify, which is the value of the customer experience, right? That doesn't have a dollar value, or it's kind of tough to derive. You can do it through customer sat or whatnot, but it's a very, very critical part. And what I view as the most important piece of modernizing your authentication capabilities, and Transmit has helped us with that.
I have one more question, just because, Rob, I remember you had this quantifiable business outcome with Transmit, where previously it would take you X amount of months to execute on a project,
Right.
and you reduce that to what? Can you describe that a little bit? Just because I think that's really interesting.
Sure, and just to continue what Dean was saying, in terms of being able to react and quantify the impact to customer, you only see that when you start having issues like either cybersecurity events or things that are happening in the environment that cause you to make changes. So one of our advantages, and we looked at a previous event where we had to create a new control for one of our applications. It took us about, I would say, 3 to 5 months. 3 to 5 months to develop, test, and roll out a security control to make a change, and that's through our change control, our policies, testing, whatnot. Looking back on that, and we actually did this as an example, it literally took us 4 hours to do the same control with the existing system. And not only that, we can actually adjust the presentation of security controls, turning them on and off. For instance, we have a policy, an email one-time password policy that we give only to select customers. And it's pretty specific of who gets that based on criteria.
High net worth.
Yeah, well, no, actually we don't allow them that because that's the main target. So
Yeah, I know.
yeah.
For us, that's the big.
Right.
They're the loudest customer.
So we can adjust and tune those the presentation of those controls on demand. So it doesn't require us to do a code change. It's literally you go in and you select a button, just like turn it on, turn it off.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much, Dean Anderson, TD Bank, Rob Davis, TIAA. Thank you. Thanks for attending. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.